Max wanted to scream, to run, but his voice wouldn't come. The air had become suffocating, as though the walls of the shop had closed in on him. The bus's voice sounded again, but this time it was different. It wasn't mechanical, but instead a distorted, haunting laugh. The figure didn't move at first, but then, slowly, it lifted its head. Max's stomach churned as he finally saw its face. It was a child, but its features were twisted, half missing, as if they'd been erased and drawn back over and over. The eyes were too wide, too hollow, and they stared right through him, as if they could see his very soul. He could feel the weight of the words pressing down on him. The shadowy children inside the bus were gone, but their presence still lingered, like a terrible memory that refused to fade. Max's pulse raced as his eyes locked onto the driver's seat. To his disbelief, there was someone sitting there. A small figure, too dark to make out clearly, but he could see the shape of its body, hunched over the wheel. Max's heart skipped a beat as the toy bus inched closer. The air around him seemed to grow thick, like he was suffocating. The store, once filled with the smell of dust and old wood, now reeked of something metallic and cold, as though the walls themselves were alive, breathing with him. His legs froze. He tried to move, to run, but his feet felt like they were glued to the floor. He watched in horror as the bus came to a complete stop just in front of him, the doors creaking open like a warning. The same chilling voice, now louder, echoed once more. "All aboard! For the ride of your life." Max's breath caught in his throat. "Who's there?" he whispered, though he wasn't sure he wanted an answer. ChatGPT said. Suddenly, the bus jerked to a halt and the mist around them cleared. The toy bus was back in the shop. The strange, shadowy children were gone. Max breathed a sigh of relief, but as he stood to leave, a voice echoed from the back of the bus. No. Max turned to see the toy bus roll toward him once again, its headlights glaring as the voice repeated, "All aboard for the ride of your life." "You said, not yet," it whispered. "You can never leave. Not while we're still here." Max tried to scream, but no sound came out. The bus seemed to grow darker, its interior filling with shadowy figures. Children, their faces twisted in expressions of fear and desperation. They stared at him, unblinking, their mouths opening to speak words he couldn't understand. He tried to reach for the door, but it wouldn't open. He was stuck. Max dropped the bus in shock, but it didn't fall to the ground. Instead, it hovered for a moment, then gently touched down, its wheels now spinning on their own. The voice repeated, "All aboard for the ride of your life." The ride seemed endless, the road stretching on forever, but Max knew that if he didn't find a way to stop it soon, he might never escape. His eyes darted around the bus, searching for something, anything that could help him. That's when he noticed the small button beneath the seat. Without thinking, he pressed it. The bus stopped right in front of Max, its small wooden doors creaking open. His heart pounded in his chest. He could feel something wasn't right. Despite his instincts telling him to run, he stepped forward, driven by an unknown force. Once inside the toy bus, the world around him blurred. The walls of the shop faded into mist, and the streets outside became a twisted, distorted version of reality. The bus began to move on its own, creaking and groaning, its little wheels rattling over a road that wasn't even there. It was a dark and stormy night, and the rain pounded against the windows of the small, run-down toy shop. Inside, the shelves were lined with toys of all kinds, but one item stood out, a bright red children's talking toy bus. It had been there for as long as anyone could remember, sitting on the top shelf, gathering dust. But tonight, something was different. Max tried to back away, but the toy bus rolled toward him, its headlights flickering, the shop's door slammed shut behind him. He was trapped. The toy bus wasn't like the others. Most toys had a simple, innocent charm, but this one had an edge. Its paint was chipped in places, revealing the faded wood underneath. Its windows, cracked and cloudy, seemed to peer back at him, almost as if they were watching his every move. Max took a hesitant step forward, drawn to it despite a strange feeling in the pit of his stomach. A young boy named Max, curious and adventurous, wandered into the shop on a dare from his friends. He was always drawn to the strange, the mysterious, and the forgotten. As he passed by the aisles, something caught his eye. The toy bus. There was something unsettling about it. The way it seemed to glow under the flickering shop lights, or perhaps it was just the angle at which Max was standing. But whatever it was, he couldn't look away. He reached out and picked it up. As his fingers wrapped around the cool plastic, the bus suddenly came to life. Its wheels creaked and a mechanical voice echoed from within. "All aboard! For the ride of your life." But the bus didn't stop. It was still moving, still careening through the foggy nightmare world. And the voices, the whispers, the shadows, they didn't stop. They were inside him now, in his mind, in his soul, calling to him. With a burst of adrenaline, he scrambled toward it, pushing aside the ghostly children that reached for him with bony hands. His fingers grasped the edge of the window, and with a sharp pull, he wrenched it open. Cold air rushed in, and for a brief moment, Max thought he had made it. He was going to escape. Max's heart pounded harder than ever as the chilling voice echoed throughout the frozen, silent bus. His limbs felt heavy, like they were bound by invisible chains. The air had become thick with the stench of decay, and the temperature continued to drop, the icy cold sinking into his bones. But as he looked around in panic, his eyes landed on the small window near the back of the bus. It was a tight fit, but there was a chance to escape. Join us. Max knew what they meant now. They weren't just inviting him. They were pulling him in, trying to consume him, to drag him into their endless cycle of torment. The bus lurched again, the shadows pressing in on him from all sides. The wall seemed to close in, the darkness swallowing everything. Max couldn't breathe. The figures surrounded him, closing in, their eyes glinting with a hunger that made his skin crawl. Join us. Max recoiled in horror, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. These children, these twisted shadows, weren't children at all. They were the souls of those who had been trapped here, in this nightmare, just like him. They didn't speak, didn't make a sound, but their eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, followed him, staring with a deep, insidious hunger. And then, slowly, they began to move. Their mouths opened in unison, but their voices were not their own. They spoke in unison, a chorus of whispers that rose and fell like a wave. But as the silence stretched on, he began to realize something worse. He wasn't alone. The dark figures from outside had entered the bus. The air grew thick with their presence. a presence that was oppressive, suffocating. The children were back. The bus screeched to a halt, the wheels grinding against the floor with an awful metallic scream. Max braced himself for another jolt, but instead the air around him went still, and for a moment he thought he might have succeeded. Desperately, Max scrambled across the bus, his hands shaking as they searched for anything that might stop the nightmare. His fingers brushed against the cold, rusted metal of the seats, and then, there was another button, hidden in the shadows beneath the driver's seat. "You can't escape us," it hissed. "We are all connected. We've been waiting for you." The toy bus's voice returned, but this time it wasn't just a mechanical sound. It was deep, resonant, as though it came from the very depths of the earth. Max stepped back, heart racing. The bus lurched forward with a sudden jolt, breaking the stillness. The mist outside the windows thickened into a swirling vortex, and the world seemed to shrink, becoming smaller and darker with each passing second. He could feel the walls closing in, the air growing suffocating, the pressure building. Through the windows, he could now see shapes moving in the darkness. Unseen eyes watching, following the bus as it sped down an endless road of twisted, shifting paths. The figures outside were too vague to make out clearly, but they were there, always there, watching him, waiting for something. The lights inside flickered, casting strange, shifting shadows on the walls. The figure of the child driver, who had once seemed so lifeless, now began to move. It tilted its head toward Max, its eyes narrowing with malice. Slowly, it stood, and Max could see it clearly for the first time. The figure was not a child at all, but something far older. Its skin was pale, stretched tight over bone, its fingers too long, its face twisted in a grotesque grin. Its Max's chest tightened as he realized that the nightmare wasn't over. The bus was alive now, and it was going somewhere. Somewhere dark, twisted, and impossible to escape. But then something unexpected happened. The toy bus, once still and silent, started to hum again. It was faint at first, barely audible, but it grew louder, the sound filling the air with a strange, almost magnetic pull. The wheels began to turn, slowly at first, but soon they spun faster and faster, as if something was forcing the bus to move against its will. He tried to move, to run, but his body betrayed him. The bus remained frozen in place, the eerie atmosphere pressing in from all sides. The cold was unbearable now. His breath came in clouds of mists, but the fog around him only seemed to grow thicker, wrapping itself around his mind, clouding his thoughts. Max wanted to scream, to run, but his voice wouldn't come. The air had become suffocating, as though the walls of the shop had closed in on him. The bus's voice sounded again, but this time it was different. It wasn't mechanical, but instead a distorted, haunting laugh.